Hi everybody! Welcome to another episode of Foxy's ApocalyptiKitchen. Now that it's fall, I'm going to be doing a fall dish. Today is going to be nuclear winter squash. So it's a two-part recipe again. The first part, you can see I've got my lovely acorn squash here, which is a type of winter squash. They are vegetables that keep very well throughout the colder months of the year, so you can store them and have food well into your the colder parts of the year. For the acorn squash portion, you're going to need one acorn squash of whatever size. You're going to need some butter. You're going to need some sugar. I'm using cane sugar today. You're going to need some maple syrup, and you're going to need some cinnamon. And just some fresh water. I'll show you what to do with that a little bit later. So the very first step is to just cut the squash in half. Be careful, use a sharp knife, and if you need to use a mallet to support the cut through, then do so, but you're cutting it directly in half longwise through the stem. There we go. Didn't perfectly cut, but so you got two halves there. Take a spoon out the insides. Got my trusty compost bowl there for that. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, this is a really nice one. That was easy. Okay, part two. Okay, there's part two. Now I have my two cleaned out halves of acorn squash. Okay, now the next step is to dress the squash. So I'm going to start with some butter. Never have too much. Okay, that's a lie. There is such a thing as too much butter. Okay, next step is to take my sugar, little spoon there, and sprinkle that over the butter and the flesh of your squash. There we go. Next step, you probably guessed it, is the maple syrup step, where we pour some syrup all over our squash. And then the next one, make sure we get some in there. So this is going to have a bit of a sweet flavor on the squash side. I'm going to use some cinnamon, and when you're doing something with cinnamon, use a spoon first because you don't want that all to go in one place. Now that my squash is dressed, I'm going to have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, as you can see right behind me there. I'm going to take my halves of squash and I'm going to place them in the bottom of my Pyrex baking dish, like this. And then I just got some clear water. I'm going to pour this into the bottom about I want about a half inch to an inch of water in the bottom of my pan. It's going to just prevent my squash from burning while it cooks, which is important. There we go. And then this goes into the oven for 60 minutes. Pretty hard to overcook a squash, so you can leave it in there and kind of forget about it. I'm going to reset and bring back the ingredients for part two, and then we'll get into the filling for this dish. Alright, welcome back to the second portion of the nuclear winter squash ApocalyptiKitchen. This time we're doing the filling, so it's going to be a chickpea curry filling. I've got some dried chickpeas here. If you are starting from dried, you're going to want to soak them. There are my soaked hydrated chickpeas. If you're working from a can, this is going to take about 1 can of canned chickpeas. You're also going to need some curry powder. I'm using a pre-mixed tandoori masala, but you can use any kind of pre-mixed curry flavors that you want. It's going to require some garlic, it's going to require some coconut milk, and it's going to require some butter or other cooking oil medium. You can also add other things to this. Oh, I'm forgetting one thing, yes. I need to go and get some greens from my hydroponic garden to add to this. Okay, that's a nice handful of greens right there. I'm going to take this back to the kitchen. And I'm back with some greens from my hydroponic garden so I can get started on this one. I've got my squash in the oven already, so this is the kind of thing you can make the filling while the squash is cooking, and it all comes out at about the same time. So a generous amount of butter in the bottom of your pot. You can do this in a fry pan. I prefer to do it in a pot so that I don't get as much spill. Okay, we've got our butter going nicely. I'm going to press my garlic right into that butter. Okay, now that I've got my garlic butter going, that's really good. I'm just going to pop my chickpeas right in. So those are going to start to cook in the butter there. Next, we're using a can of coconut milk. There we go. Okay, next I am going to add my spices. So I'm going to start with a tandoori masala and a tablespoon. These are a little heaping, but you want about 3 tablespoons. A couple of teaspoons, not too much. That's probably good right there. Use the big spoon. There we go. Last and least, I'm going to squeeze a lime. And that's going to help also give it some flavor, but the citrus is going to help break down the tough outer shell of these chickpeas. Final step, here are my hydroponic greens. I'm just going to, there they are. Take those. Kind of tear them up a little bit. Right, so this is going to cook down into a curry as I boil off that excess water. And you can see I've got about 27 minutes left on those squash, so this will all come out perfectly. So with about 10 minutes left, you can see it turned it down to minimum. This is just going to allow it to simmer without cooking off too much moisture. And we're back to finish up the nuclear winter squash. That beep means it's done. Crispy, like I said, you can't really overcook these things. It's just fine. Boom. So it smells wonderfully of cinnamon and sugar and curry in my kitchen now, which is exactly what it's supposed to smell like. Just gonna use that curry. Chickpea curries. This is the protein portion of my dish. It's just going to go right in the middle, and it's going to mingle with that buttery, sugary goodness. Syrupy. Mm-hmm. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again for another episode of ApocalyptiKitchen, watching me make some nuclear winter squash. You can find the recipe for both portions of this dish below the video, where you can also like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more of these and all of the other stuff that I make. If you really like what I do and you want to help support the show, keep me making and eating meals like this one, you can consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/foxtails. Or you can consider buying me a meal like this, which costs about as much as a cup of coffee, probably a little less. And you can do that at www.coffee.com/foxtails. And I'd like to say a special thank you to my patrons. I'll see you next month. Stay tuned. Bye! It's hot. It's so good. It's so good, but it's very hot.